Karma is not magic. It's science. The inevitable collapse of the narcissist. Everybody thinks karma takes years. Nah, karma doesn't wait. It doesn't swing back like some cosmic boomerang you threw 5 years ago. That's the biggest lie we've been sold. Karma starts the moment they start playing with you. The moment they devalue you. The moment they decide your emotional stability, your support, your presence. None of it matters anymore. And here's what they don't tell you. You're about to watch it happen in real time. Not in some distant future where they finally get what's coming to them, but right now. Right in the middle of the chaos, when you can't see it yet. This isn't about wishing bad things on anyone. This is about understanding that the narcissist isn't playing a different game than the rest of us. They're playing by the exact same rules, the rules of physics, psychology, neuroscience, and human connection. And those rules are undefeated. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand narcissistic karma in a way that changes everything. You're going to see what's actually happening underneath the manipulation. You're going to understand why that winning feeling they have right now is actually the beginning of their collapse. And most importantly, you're going to understand why their downfall was never about magic. It was always about science. Let's start here, because this is where most of us get stuck emotionally. When a narcissist is in their cycle, when they're actively devaluing you and moving towards someone new, it looks like they're on top of the world. They're glowing. They're confident. They're everywhere. They seem so free. They're posting. They're laughing. They're telling everyone how happy they are, how much better this new relationship is, how much more balanced their life finally feels. And you're sitting there broken, confused, questioning everything you thought was real, your nervous system in absolute chaos. From the outside, it looks like they won. But here's where the science comes in, and this is crucial. That glow you're seeing isn't health. It's intoxication. Think about what's actually happening neurochemically. When a narcissist meets new supply, a new source of narcissistic fuel, their brain is flooded with dopamine. Dopamine is the motivation and reward neurotransmitter. It's what drives us to seek things that make us feel alive. When you're addicted to cocaine, you feel good because of dopamine. When you're in the beginning of a new relationship, you feel good because of dopamine. The neurochemistry is literally the same. A narcissist isn't falling in love with the new person. Their brain is experiencing a chemical high from the narcissistic fuel, the attention, the admiration, the fresh source of validation that hasn't yet discovered who they really are. This is literally an addiction mechanism at work. So that glow, that's withdrawal from you, combined with the high from someone new. It's not strength. It's a drug addict looking like they finally got clean because they just got a fresh hit. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is where the real karma begins. The narcissist has now made a critical decision. They've decided to invest their energy and resources into someone who is also going to eventually discover the truth. Let me paint you a real-life picture, because this is where most people miss it. You probably did things for them that you didn't even think about as things you were doing. You paid bills they should have paid. You cooked meals they could have cooked themselves. You provided emotional support they needed, but never thanked you for. You made phone calls they could have made. You covered their mistakes. You explained them away to people who were getting concerned. You stabilized them. You held them up when they were falling, not because they asked you to, with a gun to your head, but because you loved them, because you saw their potential, because you believed in them. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up. Now here's the thing nobody talks about. All of that was infrastructure. You were building a support system that allowed them to function at a certain level. And now they've walked away from that infrastructure to go be with someone new. What do you think happens next? The new supply doesn't know about the financial gaps you are filling. She doesn't know that he's been struggling with stability that you were quietly managing. She's going to discover this the way you did, slowly, painfully, through a series of moments where she realizes, oh no, I have to carry this burden too. The bills come, the emotional meltdowns come, the manipulation comes, the coldness comes, the infidelities come, the broken promises come, all of it. And she's going to be standing in your shoes, asking the same questions you asked. But the narcissist feels like they're winning because they don't understand what you understood yet. They don't realize that what they had with you wasn't just about you being infatuated with them. It was about you being competent, reliable, resourceful, and committed to their well-being. They think all of that was because they were just that special. They're about to learn that wasn't true. Here's what people don't understand about narcissistic personality structure. A narcissist cannot maintain the same level of false self for multiple people simultaneously for extended periods. The false self is a construct. It's a performance. It requires constant external validation and constant resource management. It's like a financial pyramid scheme. It works as long as new money keeps coming in. But the moment you stop feeding it, the cracks show up. When the narcissist is still with you, they have infrastructure. You're a source of stability. You're someone who believes the version of them they're selling. You're someone who invests energy into maintaining their image and their emotional regulation. Then they devalue you and move to someone new. What they don't account for is the cognitive load. They're now managing a new person who still believes in the false self. An old person, you who knows the truth and might expose it. Flying monkeys and mutual friends who are getting confused by the story. The internal shame and emptiness that comes with abandoning someone. The anxiety about being discovered. This isn't a small thing. This is a massive psychological and practical burden. Let's talk about the neuroscience here because this matters. When you lie, your brain has to work harder than when you tell the truth. This isn't poetry. This is measurable. fMRI studies show that lying activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and other regions associated with cognitive effort. Lying is metabolically expensive. It takes energy. It requires focus. Now imagine being a pathological liar, someone who lies constantly about everything to everyone. Your brain is in a state of constant cognitive strain. Add to that the stress of potentially being discovered, and you have a nervous system that is literally overworked. Every lie they tell about you is an additional cognitive load. Every smear campaign they run is an additional cognitive load. Every time they have to manage the narrative between you and the new supply is an additional cognitive load. And this is where the karma isn't something that happens to them later. This is where the karma is happening in them right now. Their brain is being rewired in real time. Here's the neuroscience. Chronic lying changes brain structure. A study published in Nature Neuroscience showed that telling self-serving lies causes desensitization in the amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotion and ethical response. The more you lie for personal gain, the less your brain responds emotionally to lying. You become a better liar, but you also become less human. So while the narcissist is sitting there, looking confident, glowing in their new supply, their brain is literally becoming less capable of emotional connection. Their amygdala is shrinking its response to moral violations. They're becoming neurologically less able to experience guilt, less able to experience empathy, less able to recognize the harm they're causing. They're not winning. They're losing capacity for genuine human connection while they're sitting in front of the one person they're trying to convince they're fine. and the new supply. She's watching someone who is becoming progressively more callous, more defensive, more reactive, and more paranoid. Because here's the other thing. Narcissists are hyper-vigilant about being discovered. They know, on some level, what they are. Not consciously, but unconsciously, there's a constant threat detection system running. When is this person going to figure me out? When is the old supply going to reach out and tell them the truth? When is this going to collapse? This creates a baseline state of paranoia and defensiveness that gets exhausting for everyone around them, especially the new supply. While all this is happening, there's something occurring in the person being discarded that nobody talks about. You're broken. Your heart is shattered. Your nervous system is dysregulated. You're confused. You're questioning your reality. You're in pain. But you're also doing something unconsciously that's going to matter more than anything else. You're taking notes, not literally. But your brain is running a comprehensive audit. Your mind is replaying conversations. It's noticing inconsistencies. It's connecting dots. It's asking questions like, wait, didn't they tell me something different last month? Didn't they promise that? Didn't they say they felt differently? You're also noticing who stayed and who left. You're noticing who believed you and who believed them. You're noticing which people actually care about your well-being and which people were just there for the ego boost of proximity to someone charismatic. You're building awareness. Meanwhile, the narcissist is not doing this. They're too busy managing the narrative. They're too busy performing. They're too busy trying to convince the new person and everyone else that they're fine. But you're doing the real work. You're processing. You're beginning to understand. You're starting to see the pattern, not just in this relationship, but potentially in past relationships too. This is crucial because awareness is the first stage of healing, and it's also the first stage of being unkillable. See, a narcissist can destroy you if you don't see them coming. But once you see them, once you understand the mechanics of what they're doing, they lose their power. This is why trauma bonding exists, by the way, and this is important to understand. When someone is intermittently reinforcing you with kindness and cruelty, your brain gets stuck in a trauma bond. The intermittent reinforcement actually creates stronger neural pathways than consistent kindness would. It's the same mechanism that keeps people gambling at slot machines. The unpredictability is more addictive than consistency. But here's what happens when you go no contact or low contact. The cycle breaks. Without the intermittent reinforcement, your brain begins to normalize again. Your nervous system begins to regulate. And as your nervous system normalizes, you begin to see clearly. And once you see clearly, the narcissist's power over you is finished. If you're feeling this right now, like you're in the process of waking up to what happened, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because what we're about to go through, you're not alone in it. Thousands of people are in this exact place. Here's something that's going to sound almost compassionate toward the narcissist, but it's actually the most damning thing I can say about them. They cannot see value the way healthy people do. A healthy person recognizes value in terms of emotional support, reliability, someone who shows up, someone who takes care of things, someone who makes life better. A narcissist recognizes value only in terms of narcissistic supply, admiration, attention, ego boost, utility, what can you do for me, and threat level, can you expose me? So when you're cooking them dinner, paying their bills, supporting them emotionally, encouraging them, believing in them, they're not experiencing that as love or commitment. They're experiencing it as supply and utility. And because they only value supply and utility, they think they can replace you with someone who provides more supply. But here's what they don't understand, and this is the profound gap in their perception. Utility people are rare. Do you know how hard it is to find someone who will consistently pay bills that aren't theirs, cook meals they could cook themselves, provide emotional labor without expecting reciprocity, tolerate infidelity and dishonesty, defend them to others even when they're in the wrong, sacrifice their own needs for the other person's stability, clean up their messes, literally and figuratively? This isn't normal. This is what we call codependency, and it's relatively rare. And while it's not healthy for the codependent person, it's incredibly valuable to someone like a narcissist. But the narcissist thinks it's common. They think everyone does this. They think the new supply is going to do this automatically, the same way you did. She's not. And this is where the material conditions of the narcissist's life begin to deteriorate in ways they don't immediately understand. Money becomes tighter because they don't have someone quietly managing finances anymore. The household becomes more chaotic because they don't have someone managing logistics. They become more emotionally dysregulated because they don't have someone absorbing their emotional labor. Their public image becomes harder to maintain because they don't have someone proactively protecting their reputation. They're not experiencing this as losing you. They're experiencing this as everything's falling apart all at once. And they're going to blame it on circumstances, on bad luck, on other people, on the new supply not being good enough. Never on the fact that they actually required infrastructure to function, and that infrastructure was you. There's a pattern that almost nobody talks about, and it's one of the most painful things to watch if you're still emotionally attached to the narcissist. The narcissist almost always downgrades. Now, when I say downgrade, I don't necessarily mean in terms of physical attractiveness. I mean in terms of strength, consciousness, independence, and discernment. Why? Because a narcissist cannot sustain a relationship with someone who is their equal in awareness and independence. They need someone who is vulnerable, confused, or desperate enough to accept the treatment. You are probably stronger than you think. You probably had more awareness than you realized, and that strength and awareness, even if it was suppressed or minimized, was probably threatening to them. So they moved towards someone younger, less experienced, more naive, more isolated, or more desperate. And from the outside, it looks worse. It looks like they traded you in for a lesser version. And if you're being honest, part of you wants to judge the new supply as stupid or weak. But here's what's actually happening. The narcissist is choosing someone who will tolerate their behavior for longer. This is not an act of preference. This is an act of desperation. They need someone who won't figure them out as quickly. Someone whose internal alarm system isn't as well calibrated. Someone who is more easily gaslit. And yes, statistically, this means the new supply might be younger, less experienced, or in some way less equipped to handle manipulation. But this is also why the narcissist situation is actually getting worse, not better. Because a younger, less experienced person is also less likely to have the skills, resources, or stability that you had. They're less likely to quietly manage finances, less likely to advocate for them professionally, less likely to maintain the household, less likely to network on their behalf. The narcissist has traded in someone who could actually help them for someone who looks shinier, but is less equipped to do the work. And this is going to create a new kind of instability. Not because the new supply is bad, but because the narcissist has selected someone specifically because they're more vulnerable, which means they're less stable, which means they're less useful in the ways the narcissist actually needs. So the material conditions of the narcissist's life continue to decline, and they still don't understand why. Let's go deeper into what's happening neurologically when a narcissist devalues someone. In the idealization phase, the narcissist's brain is experiencing what's called positive illusion. They're literally seeing you through a lens of bias that makes you seem better than you are. This activates reward centers in their brain, particularly the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the nucleus accumbens. But this isn't love. This is addiction to a fantasy. The moment you become real, the moment you disappoint them, question them, or simply exist as a full human being with your own needs, their brain's perception flips. And it doesn't just flip, it overcorrects. This is called the splitting mechanism, and it's a core feature of narcissistic psychology. The person goes from all good to all bad in the narcissist's mind. And here's the thing. This isn't a choice the narcissist is making. This is a neurological response. Their brain is literally incapable of holding complexity. It can't simultaneously see your strengths and your weaknesses. It's binary. You're perfect or you're worthless. Now, when they split you into all bad, what happens? They have to actively suppress memories of the good things. They have to rewrite the narrative of your entire relationship. They have to convince themselves that you are always manipulative, always selfish, always the problem. This requires enormous cognitive effort. Remember what we learned earlier. Lying is metabolically expensive, and it requires constant cognitive load. The narcissist is now spending mental energy every single day actively rewriting the history of your relationship. They're suppressing the memory of times they felt loved. They're reinterpreting kindness as manipulation. They're convincing themselves that your pain is fake or deserved. And every single act of rewriting and suppression is taking a toll on their brain. Studies on cognitive dissonance show that when we have to maintain beliefs that contradict reality, it creates actual stress in the brain. The longer we do it, the more entrenched those false beliefs become, and the more difficult it becomes to access reality. So the narcissist is progressively losing touch with actual reality, because they're investing so much mental energy into maintaining a false narrative about you and about themselves. Meanwhile, you're recovering because you're facing reality, not running from it. Here's something that happens that most abuse survivors understand, but most people don't talk about. The flying monkeys. Flying monkeys are the people who believe the narcissist's narrative and who help enforce the punishment. They're not always consciously aware that they're being manipulated. They just know that the narcissist is telling them you're terrible, and they accept it at face value. The narcissist invests enormous energy into creating and managing flying monkeys. They're constantly cultivating relationships with people who will believe their version of events. They're constantly subtly poisoning people against you. And from the narcissist's perspective, this feels like strategy. This feels like they're winning. They've turned your mutual friends against you. They've convinced people that you're the problem. But here's what's actually happening. The narcissist is burning social capital to do this. Every relationship they cultivate primarily to have someone on their side is a relationship that isn't genuine. It's utilitarian. It's based on lies. And these relationships are unstable because they're built on a false foundation. And then something happens. The flying monkeys start to figure it out. Maybe they see the same patterns with the new supply. Maybe the narcissist treats them the way they treated you. Maybe they realize they've been lied to. Maybe they just get tired of the drama. And when they do, they don't just leave the narcissist. They become walking evidence of what the narcissist is. So the narcissist has spent all this energy and resources burning bridges with you, but they've also created a network of people who now know firsthand that their narrative is unreliable. That's not a win. That's the slow construction of a prison where everyone around them knows the truth. And the new supply. She watches all this. She watches how the narcissist treats the people who were once close to them. She watches how they discard people. She watches how they weaponize flying monkeys. And she's starting to understand that if the relationship goes the way of your relationship, that's going to happen to her too. The narcissist is actually teaching the new supply how to recognize abuse by their behavior itself. Let's talk about something that is absolutely crucial to understanding narcissistic collapse: shame. Narcissists are terrified of shame. It's not just an emotion for them. It's existential. It's a threat to the false self. And right now, they're experiencing it. Because on some level, they know what they did, not consciously, but in the parts of their brain they're not listening to. They know. They know they hurt someone. They know they lied. They know they manipulated. They know they abandoned. They know they rewrote history. And that knowledge creates what's called ego depletion, a state where the psychological resources required to maintain the false self become exhausted. So they have to do something. They have to increase the volume. They have to talk louder about how happy they are. They have to post more frequently about the new relationship. They have to invest more energy into the narrative that you were the problem. This is called protest behavior, and it's actually a sign of desperation, not confidence. A person who is genuinely happy and secure doesn't need to convince everyone of it. But a person who is internally unstable and ashamed, they need constant external validation to manage the internal chaos. So the narcissist is actually signaling their own collapse through their behavior. And they will never admit this, not to the new supply, not to their friends, not to themselves, because admitting it would mean admitting that the false self isn't real. And admitting that would be the end of everything they've constructed. So they're locked into a pattern where they have to keep performing, keep lying, keep denying, keep running. Let me talk about something that's probably affecting you right now: the trauma bond. A trauma bond forms when you experience cycles of abuse, cruelty, abandonment, betrayal, followed by intermittent reinforcement, promises, apologies, acts of kindness, moments of seeming perfection. Your brain literally gets addicted to this pattern. The intermittent reinforcement creates more dopamine than consistent kindness would. It's why people stay in abusive relationships, even when they can see the abuse clearly. But here's the thing. The narcissist becomes addicted to the trauma bond too. They need your reaction. They need the drama. They need the ability to pull you back in. Because if they can't do that, they have to face what they actually are without the distraction of managing you. So when you go no contact, something shifts. The narcissist loses their ability to get a reaction from you. And without that reaction, they lose a significant source of narcissistic fuel. They also lose the distraction that kept them from facing their own internal emptiness. This is where the real karma accelerates. Because now, without you to focus on, the narcissist has to deal with the new supply, who is already starting to see through them. The absence of a reliable source of secondary fuel, you. The internal shame they've been avoiding. The fear that people are figuring them out. The reality of their life, which is increasingly unstable. No contact doesn't mean the narcissist won't try to hoover you. Hoovering is when they try to suck you back in. They'll reach out. They'll love bomb. They'll make promises. They'll create situations to get your attention. But every hoovering attempt is also evidence of their own collapse. They're desperate. They're reaching for a source of validation they lost. They're trying to recreate the intoxication they had in the beginning of your relationship, or the chaos that at least gave them a sense of control. Follow the narc-op if you're learning this for the first time, because understanding no contact is going to be essential to your recovery. Not all narcissistic collapses look the same. There are generally two trajectories, and both are forms of collapse. The silent disappearance. In this scenario, the narcissist just fades. They were everywhere. They were posting. They were making appearances. They were the center of every conversation. And then gradually, they just become a regular person. They post less. They're seen less. They're talked about less. Life moves on without them being the focal point. What happened? Their supply dried up. Maybe the new relationship failed. Maybe they realized maintaining all these narratives is exhausting. Maybe they just moved to a new city and started over with a new set of people. But what they didn't do is become healthier. They just became smaller, less prominent, less noticeable. This is collapse too, even if it looks quieter. Because a narcissist without an audience is like a vampire without blood. They're still alive, but they're fundamentally diminished. The hoovering attempt. In this scenario, the narcissist can't let go. They keep trying to pull you back in. They'll contact you. They'll apologize. They'll love bomb. They'll create emergencies. They'll try to make you jealous. They'll reach out through flying monkeys, and every single attempt is an act of desperation. The hoovering happens because the narcissist is experiencing the collapse we've been talking about, and they need to recreate the chaos that gave them a sense of control. They need to feel the old intoxication. They need to know they still have power over you. But the hoovering itself is proof that they don't have that power anymore. If they did, they wouldn't need to reach out. If the new relationship was really working, they wouldn't be thinking about you. Every hoovering attempt is the narcissist screaming, "I'm falling. I need you to catch me. I need to feel powerful again." And if you understand this neurologically, hoovering attempts become less painful to witness. You're not seeing power. You're seeing desperation. You're seeing collapse in real time. Both of these endings, the quiet disappearance and the desperate hoovering, are forms of karma. They're not the big dramatic comeuppance that people fantasize about, but they're real, they're inevitable, and they're happening. Now, let's talk about you. Because while all of this is happening to the narcissist, something very different is happening to you. You're healing. Not immediately, not without pain, but you're moving towards something that the narcissist will never have. Actual growth. This is called post-traumatic growth, and it's well documented in the psychological literature. When people survive trauma and actually process it, rather than just moving on, they develop specific strengths that people who haven't experienced trauma don't have. They develop deeper self-awareness, stronger boundaries, better ability to recognize manipulation, greater compassion for others who suffer, a more realistic understanding of human nature, increased resilience, stronger sense of purpose. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating. When you go through trauma and actually allow yourself to feel it and process it, your brain is literally rewiring itself. The areas of your brain associated with threat detection become more sophisticated. Your ability to read people becomes more accurate. Your nervous system, which has been in hypervigilance, begins to regulate. Meanwhile, the narcissist is doing the opposite. They're becoming less aware, less capable of authentic connection, less able to regulate, and less human. So you're moving toward wholeness while they're moving toward fragmentation. And this is where the real glow-up happens. People start to notice that you're different. You're quieter maybe, more grounded, less reactive. You don't get pulled into the chaos the way you used to. You're clearer about what you want. You're less likely to accept crumbs of affection as if they're meals. You're becoming someone that the narcissist wouldn't even be able to manipulate anymore if they tried. You're developing immunity to their tactics because you understand how they work. And that's not a small thing. That's freedom. The narcissist will never have this. They'll never wake up and realize what they lost because they'll never understand what they had. They'll never develop genuine self-awareness because that would require facing the void that the false self is covering up. But you will. If you want to go deeper into understanding your own healing process and the specific stages of recovery, schedule a one-on-one. Email the-narc-op@gmail.com. Let's talk about something that might sound abstract, but it's actually very concrete. The narcissist is fighting against fundamental laws of human psychology. The false self is not sustainable long-term. It's not. Neuroscience is clear on this. The human brain is wired for authentic connection, and authentic connection requires vulnerability. It requires admitting when you're wrong. It requires showing your actual self. A narcissist refuses to do this, so they're constantly working against their own neurobiology. Every time they choose the lie over the truth, they're creating more cognitive strain. Every time they choose manipulation over vulnerability, they're isolating themselves further. Every time they choose the new supply over actual growth, they're recreating the exact conditions that led to the collapse in the first place. It's like they're on a treadmill that's increasing speed. They're moving faster and faster, but they're not actually going anywhere. They're just becoming more exhausted. And eventually, the treadmill wins. They fall. This isn't magic. This isn't karma in the sense of cosmic justice. This is physics. This is cause and effect. This is what happens when you structure your entire existence around avoiding reality. The system isn't designed to make the narcissist fail. The system is just designed to be real. And reality, over time, reveals what lies cannot hide forever. One more thing that most people don't talk about. What happens to the flying monkeys when they realize the truth? Flying monkeys are often people who are themselves vulnerable to narcissistic influence. They might have their own insecurities, their own need for belonging, their own difficulty recognizing manipulation. But they're not evil. And eventually, many of them wake up. They start to notice the inconsistencies. They watch the narcissist treat the new supply the way they treated you. They realize that they themselves are being manipulated. They feel the exhaustion of the emotional labor they're being asked to do. And when they wake up, they become walking proof of what the narcissist is. Some of them might reach out to you and apologize. Some of them might just quietly distance themselves. Some of them might even warn others about the narcissist. What's significant is this: the narcissist's support system is actively deteriorating while they're trying to maintain the false self. They're losing flying monkeys. They're losing credibility. They're losing the network that was protecting their reputation. And they're trying to compensate by being more grandiose, more controlling, more abusive to whoever is currently in their sphere. But that just accelerates the process of people waking up and leaving. So the collapse isn't a sudden thing. It's a gradual erosion of every support structure they've built, all while they're trying to convince everyone they're fine. Here's where it gets real for the new supply. Everything you went through, she's about to start going through it. The idealization phase is starting to crack. The narcissist is less available than before. The love bombing is becoming less frequent. The criticism is becoming more frequent. The gaslighting is starting. She's confused. She's questioning herself. She's wondering if she did something wrong. And she might reach out. She might look for information. She might find content like this. And she might start to understand that she's not the problem. But here's the thing. You can't save her. You can barely save yourself. And trying to is a way of staying connected to the narcissist through a proxy. So while you might feel empathy for her, and that's beautiful and human, the most important thing you can do is keep your own focus on your own healing. Because the best thing you can offer to her, without words, is the example of a person who got out and built a life that doesn't require the narcissist's validation. That's the real revolution. Let's talk about what's happening in your body right now, because this is crucial. Trauma creates what's called a dysregulated nervous system. Your nervous system has been stuck in fight or flight mode. Everything is threatening. Every notification could be them. Every silence could be the calm before the storm. Every moment of peace is temporary. This is not weakness. This is a natural response to living in an unsafe situation. But when you go no contact, when you remove the threat, your nervous system doesn't immediately understand that it's safe. It takes time. It takes intention. It takes practices like grounding techniques, 5 to 4, 3 to 2 minus 1. 5 things you see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Breathwork, activation of the parasympathetic nervous system through longer exhales. Movement helps metabolize the stress hormones that have been trapped in your body. Connection with safe people helps teach your nervous system that relationships can be safe. Therapy helps process the trauma and understand what happened. As you do this work, your nervous system actually heals. The hypervigilance decreases. The anxiety decreases. You start to feel safer in your own skin. And here's the neuroscience. As your nervous system heals, your perception clears. You start to see things you couldn't see before. You start to trust yourself again. You start to believe that you're not crazy. You start to understand that you were right about things, even though they told you that you were wrong. This is the opposite of what's happening to the narcissist. While their nervous system is increasing in dysregulation and shame, yours is moving toward regulation and truth. You've probably noticed that the narcissist almost never admits they did anything wrong. They might say something like, "I'm sorry you feel that way," which isn't an apology. That's a deflection. Or they might say, "We both made mistakes," which distributes blame equally when the dynamics were never equal. Or they might just act like nothing happened and expect you to move on. And you've probably wondered, don't they feel guilty? Don't they know what they did? The answer is complicated, and it's rooted in neuroscience. Remember the desensitization of the amygdala that we talked about earlier? The part of the brain that processes ethical response and emotional recognition. The narcissist's amygdala has been desensitized through chronic lying and chronic violation. So, on a neurological level, they're less capable of experiencing genuine guilt. But there's more. There's also something called defensive denial. The narcissist knows, on some level, what they did. But admitting it would destroy the false self. So their brain essentially refuses to process it. It's not a choice. It's a neurological survival mechanism gone haywire. They literally cannot afford to admit fault because it would collapse the entire structure of their identity. So they're locked into denial. They have to maintain the narrative that they did nothing wrong, that you're the problem, that you're making it up, that you're crazy. And the more they deny, the more they're neurologically entrenching the denial, creating thicker and thicker layers of protection around the void where their actual self should be. This is actually tragic in a way if you're capable of feeling that emotion, because it means they're never going to heal. They're never going to grow. They're never going to experience the freedom that comes with genuine accountability. But it also means you can't get the apology you deserve from them. You have to give it to yourself. Let's simplify everything we've talked about into something mathematical, because collapse is actually predictable. You have a false self that requires constant external validation plus supply, cognitive depletion from chronic lying, resources, a diminishing support system as people wake up, infrastructure, a new supply who is less equipped to provide stability, resources, a growing risk of being discovered, security, a nervous system that is increasingly dysregulated, capacity, an inability to process reality or adapt, flexibility. So the equation looks like this: supply plus resources plus infrastructure plus stability, depletion, losses, risks, dysregulation, rigidity equal to inevitable collapse. This isn't complicated. This is just arithmetic, and no amount of love bombing, new supplies, flying monkeys, or strategic positioning can change this equation fundamentally. The narcissist is dealing with the laws of physics and psychology. You can't negotiate with those. Let's be very clear about something. The narcissist caused real harm. They took things that belong to you. They took your time, time you'll never get back. They took your trust, trust in people, trust in yourself, trust in reality. They took your peace of mind. They created chaos in your nervous system. They took your potential. You invested energy in them that could have gone toward your own growth. They took your resources, money, emotional labor, practical help, support. They took your good faith. They weaponized your vulnerability against you. But here's what they could not take: your capacity to learn, to grow, to heal, and to become wiser. The narcissist had access to all the same information that was available to you. They had access to all the same opportunities for growth, but they chose to use it for manipulation instead of transformation. You're choosing differently, and that difference, that fundamental choice to face reality instead of hide from it, is what's going to ultimately separate your life from theirs. You want to know what the most convincing evidence of narcissistic karma is? It's not dramatic. It's not a sudden fall from grace or a public humiliation. It's much quieter and much more devastating. The people who know them best are progressively leaving. Think about what that means. The people with the most intimate knowledge of who the narcissist actually is, the people who have the deepest insight into their behavior, the people who could potentially love them most fully, those are the people who are running away the fastest. That's not a reflection on the people leaving. That's not because those people are weak or disloyal. That's because once you actually know who the narcissist is, you cannot unknow it. And once you understand what they're doing, you cannot accept it. So they're left with people who don't know them well enough yet to understand. People who are so damaged themselves that they can't see clearly. People they haven't had time to fully manipulate yet. The narcissist is progressively left with people who are less aware, less equipped, and less capable of actual connection. That's not a win. That's a prison. Here's what the timeline actually looks like if you stay committed to your recovery. Month 1 to 3, immediate crisis. You're raw. You're in pain. You're dysregulated. The narcissist is in the "we're so happy" phase. It looks like they won, but their brain is beginning the cognitive overload we discussed. Month 3 to 6, stabilization. You're sleeping better, eating better. Breathing is easier. The narcissist's first crisis with the new supply emerges. They blame the new supply. They blame circumstances. They don't see their own role. You're beginning to see the patterns clearly. Month 6 to 12. Clarity. You're actively rebuilding your life. You're not thinking about them constantly. The new supply is becoming exhausted. The idealization is fully cracking. The narcissist's life is becoming demonstrably more chaotic. You're starting to feel genuinely okay in moments. Year 1 to 2, integration. You've integrated the lessons. You're significantly healed. The new supply has either left or is deeply unhappy and trapped. The narcissist has either moved to a new supply or is in a state of quiet decline. You're becoming someone that narcissistic manipulation couldn't touch if they tried. Year 2. Liberation. You're living a life that the narcissist can't access or understand. They're either cycling through new supplies or fading into irrelevance. When you think of them, it's with clarity and compassion, not pain. You're using your experience to help others and live more authentically. This timeline isn't the same for everyone. Some people heal faster. Some people take longer. Some people have more complex entanglements, kids, finances, mutual friends, that slow the process. But the direction is always the same if you stay committed. You're moving toward wholeness, while the narcissist is moving toward fragmentation. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Surviving narcissistic abuse actually gives you superpowers. Not metaphorically. Literally, you've developed skills that most people don't have. Pattern recognition. You can see narcissistic behavior in a conversation that takes other people years to understand. You can spot love bombing. You can identify gaslighting. You can recognize the cycle, boundary setting. You've learned, often the hard way, that you have to be willing to lose people to keep yourself safe. That's powerful, emotional intelligence. You've had to develop the ability to read people carefully because your survival depended on it. That intuition doesn't go away. Resilience. You've survived something that most people don't understand and that literature and culture told you might break you. But you didn't break, you bent. That's strength, authenticity. You've been forced to reckon with what's real and what's not. You've had to rebuild your sense of reality from the ground up. That clarity is rare. Most people never have to face that question. Discernment. You can now tell the difference between genuine connection and performance. You can spot people who are performing long before they become a threat. Compassion. You understand suffering on a cellular level. You understand how good people can get trapped. You understand how hard it is to heal. That makes you capable of genuine compassion. These aren't small things. These are the skills that lead to creating healthy relationships, avoiding future narcissists, and living a more authentic life. The narcissist will never develop these skills. They had the opportunity, but they chose the path of denial instead. You chose the path of truth. That choice is what's going to separate your life from theirs, ultimately. And you might see them at a mutual friends event. You might run into them at the grocery store. You might get contacted by them out of nowhere. You might hear about them through the grapevine. And the moment you're waiting for will happen. The moment when you realize, they're smaller than I thought. They're less powerful than I believed. They're not special. They're just a person doing the same predictable things. That moment is important. That moment is when the spell is officially broken, and it won't feel like triumph. It'll feel like simple clarity. You'll notice that they look tired, maybe. Or they're still performing the same way they were performing before. Or they're trying to act like you didn't matter, which is just another performance. And you won't feel angry. You might feel sad. You might feel compassion. You might feel nothing at all. But you won't feel confused anymore. You won't feel like they have power over you. You won't feel like you did something wrong. You'll just see them clearly for what they are. And then you'll move on with your life, Here's something important. Consciousness is the currency of change. Once you're conscious of something, you can't act the same way again. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. The narcissist is progressing in the opposite direction. They're becoming less conscious. They're becoming more defended. They're becoming more locked into denial. Every time they choose the lie over the truth, they're choosing unconsciousness. You're choosing consciousness. Every time you face a painful reality, instead of running from it, you're choosing to become more aware. And that difference in consciousness is what creates the divergence in outcomes. This isn't about good people and bad people. It's about conscious people and unconscious people. And the conscious people, over time, build better lives. The unconscious people, over time, experience the consequences of their unconsciousness. That's not judgment. That's just how the system works. Your brain is incredibly adaptive. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's one of the most hopeful truths in neuroscience. The pathways that trauma carved into your brain can be rewritten. Not erased, you don't forget what happened, but rewritten so that those memories don't control you. Every time you choose a safe person over an unsafe person, choose to believe yourself over believing the narcissist's version, choose to sit with your feelings instead of numbing them, choose to take care of yourself instead of abandoning yourself, choose to speak your truth even when it's uncomfortable. You're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways. You're making it easier to do these things the next time. And over time, these new pathways become stronger than the old ones. So the person you're becoming, the person who has healthy boundaries, clear thinking, good judgment, that's not just psychological change. That's neurological change. That's real. And it's permanent. The narcissist, meanwhile, is doing the opposite. They're reinforcing pathways of lying, denial, and disconnection. Every time they choose those paths, they're making it harder to choose differently. So the divergence isn't just circumstantial. It's neurological. Let me bring this all home. Karma is not some mystical force that eventually catches up with people. Karma is not magic. Karma is not cosmic justice waiting to strike. Karma is consequence. It's the inevitable result of choices and actions meeting the laws of psychology, neurobiology, physics, and human connection. The narcissist made choices to prioritize the false self over authenticity, to use people instead of connecting with them, to lie instead of facing truth, to manipulate instead of communicate, to abandon instead of commit. And every single choice has a consequence. Not because the universe is punishing them, not because they're bad people who deserve it, but because their choices are incompatible with how human beings actually work. Their choices are incompatible with building genuine relationships. Their choices are incompatible with creating stable lives. Their choices are incompatible with developing resilience or authentic strength. Their choices inevitably lead to isolation, dysregulation, and collapse. That's not magic. That's mathematics. And the opposite is true for you. You chose to face reality. That has consequences too, good ones. You chose to feel your feelings instead of numb them. That builds emotional wisdom. You chose to understand yourself instead of blame others. That builds self-awareness. You chose to heal instead of harm. That builds integrity. And these choices inevitably lead to building a better life. That's not magic either. That's just how life works when you're aligned with truth. Karma didn't wait. You just couldn't see it yet. Because while you were in the chaos, while you were being told you were crazy, while you were absorbing the blame for their choices, while you were supporting someone who was destroying you, karma was already working. It was working in the form of the cognitive burden of their lies. It was working in the form of the neural pathways they were carving into their own brains. It was working in the form of the relationships they were burning through. It was working in the form of the supply sources they were exhausting. It was working in the form of the people they were training to recognize their patterns. Karma was never waiting for them. Karma was already there, built into every choice they were making. And while karma was working on them, something was working on you, healing. Your nervous system was learning that it could regulate. Your brain was developing new pathways toward truth and clarity. Your spirit was gathering evidence of your own value. Your resilience was being forged in the crucible of survival. Your wisdom was being earned through facing reality. And now, as you move forward, you get to live in a reality where you understand how this all works. You understand that the narcissist isn't winning. You understand that their glow is intoxication, not health. You understand that their confidence is performance, not actual stability. You understand that every person they've hurt is a brick in the wall that's eventually going to fall on them. You understand that their collapse isn't something that might happen. It's something that's inevitably happening in real time and has been happening since the moment they decided to play with you. And you understand that you don't have to wait for their collapse to feel better, because your healing isn't dependent on their suffering. Your freedom isn't dependent on their downfall. Your growth isn't dependent on them finally understanding what they did. Your healing is dependent on you, on your choices, on your commitment to truth, on your willingness to feel what you feel and move through it anyway. And that's where your real power is, not in the narcissist finally getting what they deserve, not in the karma finally catching up with them, but in you becoming someone who cannot be destroyed by someone like them, in you building a life that doesn't require their validation, in you understanding yourself so clearly that their manipulation becomes obvious, in you healing so completely that their absence is actually a relief. That's the real revolution, and that's what's actually happening right now. So if you're feeling this, if this is resonating with something you know to be true, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because what you're discovering about narcissistic behavior, about manipulation, about your own strength, that's the beginning of everything changing. And when everything starts to change, you need a community of people who understand. A space where you can be seen, validated, and guided. Follow the Narc-Op. Let's move through this together. And if you want personalized guidance on your specific situation, if you want to go deeper into understanding your own healing process, if you want support that meets you where you are, schedule a one-on-one. Email the-narc-op@gmail.com. We're here. We see you, and we know that the life you're building is going to be extraordinary, because it's built on truth. And truth, my friend, is the only foundation that actually lasts. Karma is not magic. It's science, and science eventually always wins. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.